In 1987, a quarterback in the NFL asked his head coach for permission to change his jersey number. Mid-season, something almost never done. His coach asked him why. He said, "Because Reggie White told me before the game that God sent him here to destroy number 11. And I believe him." His coach told him he could not change his number, so the quarterback did the next best thing. He changed his snap count, changed his entire protection scheme, changed the way he had played football his entire career. All of it because one man on the other side of the line had looked him in the eyes before kickoff and spoken with the complete calm certainty of someone who already knew how the afternoon was going to end. That quarterback threw for over 20,000 yards in his career, or he called facing Reggie White the only time in his life he felt genuinely outmatched by another human being. Most players in NFL history were feared because of what they could do to your body. Lawrence Taylor broke your bones. Barry Sanders broke your confidence. Reggie White broke something nobody had a name for. He was 6'5", 300 pounds, fast enough to run down cornerbacks, strong enough to move offensive linemen the way most men move furniture. But that was never the thing that stayed with people. The thing that stayed was the look in his eyes before the snap. Not rage, not hunger, not the cold focus of a man preparing to do violence. Something quieter, something that had no place on a football field. Certainty, complete, unshakable certainty. Like a man who had already seen how the play ended before the ball was snapped. Because in his mind, he had. Reggie White did not believe he was one of the best defensive players who ever lived. He believed, with every part of himself, that God had placed him on that field for a purpose, on that specific Sunday, against that specific opponent. And when a man believes that, truly believes it, down to the marrow of every bone, he does not play football the same way everyone else plays football. He plays it like it was already written. This is the story of what that felt like, told by the men who had no choice but to stand across from it. In 1985, Reggie White's first NFL season, the Philadelphia Eagles played the New York Giants. The Giants' offensive line was one of the most experienced in the league. These were not young men, not rookies, not men who could be rattled by reputation. On the very first play of the very first drive, Reggie White lined up against their starting offensive tackle. The ball snapped. Reggie White did not rush, did not bull rush, did not spin. He put one hand on the offensive tackle's chest and pushed. The offensive tackle, 6'5", 290 pounds, went backwards like a revolving door, clean, effortless, like the man had not spent a decade in the NFL preparing for exactly this moment. The quarterback released the ball in sheer panic, incomplete. The Giants' offensive line huddled before the next snap. Their center, a 12-year veteran, looked at his teammates and said something that was later recalled by 3 separate players. He said, "Whatever you were planning to do today, it is not going to work, so just survive. That is the whole plan now. Just survive." First play, first snap, first touch. The plan was already survival. Here is what separated Reggie White from every other dominant player in NFL history. Lawrence Taylor wanted you to fear him. Barry Sanders let his feet do the talking. Reggie White wanted to save you. Right before he destroyed you. Before games, he would find the opposing offensive lineman he was about to face and talk to him. Not trash talk, not intimidation. He would ask about his family, his children, his faith, genuinely, warmly, like 2 men meeting at church on a Sunday morning. Then the ball snapped, and he became something else entirely. Quarterback Jim Everett recalled it publicly. He said, "The most terrifying part was not the hit. It was the 30 seconds before the hit, when he was the kindest human being I had ever met on a football field. And then the whistle blew." That combination, warmth and then complete devastation, was something no offensive lineman in the history of the league ever found an answer to. Because you cannot scheme against kindness. You cannot prepare for a man who genuinely loves you and is still going to run through you like you were never there. If this story is hitting you differently, subscribe right now, because the worst is still coming. Nobody ever asked about his own teammates. Every story about Reggie White comes from the men who faced him on Sundays. But there was another group of men who faced him every single day, his own offensive linemen, in practice. These were the men assigned to block him during training camp, during walkthroughs, during every Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday of every season for 15 years. One of them, a veteran offensive guard who spent 6 seasons as Reggie White's practice dummy, gave an interview that most people never saw. He said, "People ask me what it was like blocking Reggie in practice. I tell them it was the best education of my career and the most humiliating experience of my life. Both things at exactly the same time, every single day." He paused. He then said, "There were mornings I drove to the facility and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before going inside. Not because I didn't want to work, because I knew that within 1 hour, Reggie White was going to show me something about myself I wasn't ready to see. That is what greatness does to the people closest to it. It doesn't just beat you, it reveals you." Super Bowl 31, January 26, 1997, Green Bay Packers versus the New England Patriots. The night before the biggest game of his life, Reggie White did not study film, did not go over his game plan, did not work through his pass rush moves with the defensive coach. He went to his hotel room, got on his knees, and prayed for 3 hours. Not for victory. He prayed, according to his own account, for the strength to be a vessel, to be used for something larger than a football game. His teammates knew not to disturb him. The next day, on the largest stage in professional football, Reggie White had 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and completely dismantled one of the most talented offensive lines the Patriots had ever assembled. In the post-game interview, soaked in sweat, Super Bowl champion, the reporters expected celebration. Instead, he stood at that podium and said quietly, "I just thank God for allowing me to be here. This was never about me. It was never about football." The room went silent, because standing there, trophy gleaming behind him, every person in that room understood that they were not looking at a football player who happened to be religious. They were looking at a man of God who happened to play football, and for 17 seasons, nobody could tell the difference. Here is the thing that nobody ever says about Reggie White. Every player in this video, the lineman who prayed before every snap, the quarterback who wanted to change his number, the teammate who sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes every single morning, every single one of them was trying to solve the same problem. How do you stop a man who does not believe he can be stopped? Not out of arrogance, but out of something far more dangerous than arrogance: faith. Reggie White never walked onto a football field believing he was the best player out there. He walked onto that field believing he was exactly where he was supposed to be. There is a difference, a vast, terrifying, immovable difference. The best player can have a bad day, can doubt himself, can be schemed against, can be worn down by the fourth quarter. A man fulfilling a purpose cannot be worn down, cannot be schemed against, cannot doubt himself. Because doubt requires the possibility that you might be wrong. And Reggie White, for 17 seasons, never once entertained that possibility. Not for a single snap, not for a single second. That is not a football advantage. That is an advantage that exists in a different dimension than football entirely. And every offensive lineman who ever faced him felt that difference in their bones before the ball was ever snapped. Reggie White passed away on December 26, 2004. He was 43 years old. The entire NFL went quiet in a way it never had before and never has since. Not because they lost a great player. The NFL loses great players every generation. They went quiet because they understood, in the way you only understand something after it is gone, that what Reggie White was could not be manufactured, could not be coached, could not be recruited or drafted or developed. What he was given. The quarterback who changed his number out of fear wept when he heard the news. The lineman who prayed before every snap said he felt like something had been removed from the world that was holding things in their proper place. And the teammate who sat in parking lots dreading practice said it was the best and most important thing that ever happened to his career. All of them carrying him still. Not as a memory of a football player, as proof that once in a generation, something arrives on this earth that is not here to compete. It is here to remind you what human beings are capable of when they believe completely that they were made for exactly this. If this story reached something in you, Share it with one person who needs to hear it today. Not just a football fan, anyone. Because this was never just about football. Subscribe, and we will keep finding the stories that never get told.